I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. Welcome to another episode of Ask Amanda Anything, where you can indeed ask me anything. I don't know if I'll have the answers, but I will attempt to respond to those questions. As per usual, subscribers get priority, though. So if you really, really have a burning question that you want answered, subscribe, and we'll put you at the top of the list.
And that's at amandaknox.substack.com, where you can subscribe and also get access to subscriber-only essays that Amanda's been writing and bonus content. And let's see, what else? I'm Chris. You know me. I'm going to be playfully poking and prodding Amanda, sometimes playing devil's advocate to try and draw out her best answers. And
let's do it.
Here we go. So,
what you got?
This first question comes from someone who has just seen episode 4 of The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox, out on Hulu now. New episodes every Wednesday. And this episode features the trial prominently. It's the first big trial episode. And one of the things that happens in this episode is that your former friend and roommate, Philomena, kind of testifies against you. In a very difficult to watch and sad moment. So the question is, there's actually two different people asked a very similar question. Your flatmates threw you under the bus. Have any of them reached out to apologize? Someone else asks, I'm wondering if you've had any apology or contact from your roommates or friends who spoke against you in the trial. Have any of them been able to honestly reflect on the pain they caused, or are they also stuck in the constraints of confirmation bias?
Yeah. Why all these the sad questions? Right. The answer to that question is no. I have never received any contact from either Laura or Philomena reflecting upon their role in my wrongful conviction. And to be clear, and I think this is something that we try to convey in the series, it wasn't so much that Philomena was testifying against me per se. I think what she was trying to do was be Switzerland and basically say, I wash my hands of this whole affair. But in so doing, she also lied on the stand in a way that ultimately had a negative impact on me. So she was self-interested and playing Switzerland. She wasn't testifying against me. She wasn't testifying for me. She was called both.
Was she called by
both? Yes.
By both?
She was called by both the witness or the defense and the prosecution. And the prosecution tried to, question her in such a way that would be suggestive of me being this outlier in the house and this dirty tramp. And on the other hand, our defense was like, but what about all these, great times? And isn't that an exaggeration? So she was honest-ish in the sense that she, said on the stand, I've never seen Meredith and Amanda argue. I've never heard them talk badly about each other. They seem to be friends. I had no reason to think that Amanda would ever commit this crime. But when asked about marijuana use in particular in the household, she said that both her and Laura did not smoke pot. And that, in fact, she even said, I have sinned once. And that is just a flagrant lie. And she lied to save her own skin. She's a legal, she was on the course of being a lawyer, and she would never be able to pass the bar if she had a drug record behind her. So she did not admit to ever consuming drugs, or, she said, I've sinned once. But in so doing, she...
Just for the context for people who don't quite know the weight of that lie, I think it's also worth pointing out here that Philomena and Laura are the ones who asked you to lie to the police very early on and say, do not tell the police that we smoke marijuana. And you did follow their
And that went
suggestion.
against me.
And when the police asked you about marijuana, it's partly what led the police to think you weren't being honest with them, and was a big contributing factor to the false confession. So you might not have been in this whole boat to begin with if they hadn't asked you to lie about
Indeed.
marijuana.
So to
and
your
then
point,
one other thing, a big part about how you're being vilified is also that you're being painted as a drug addict, and that marijuana, crazily enough, in Italy, is being sold as a drug that leads people to commit violent.
Or at the very least, that was a source of conflict in the household, right? Like if the portrait that is being portrayed is that no one in the house except for Amanda smokes marijuana, and Amanda's clearly the black sheep of the household who is committing petty crimes on her way to committing greater ones, then that's one picture. But that's not the actual picture. Everyone in the household smoked marijuana, and like on a multiple times daily basis were Philomena and Laura. They were potheads. So no. So the ultimate answer to your question, whoever asked this question, is no. I have never received any contact throughout, the last time I had any direct contact with Philomena was when she called me on the night that I was in the police station about to be interrogated for the final time. And on that call, she was discussing with me plans to find a new apartment together with her and Laura. And that was the last I ever heard directly from her.
I think it's also worth just noting that I think people don't get how central this marijuana thing was to the whole prosecution theory, because it's also a crucial link in how they attempted to tie you to Rudy Guede, right? Rudy Guede is supposedly a petty drug dealer, and they're saying, oh, Amanda was buying marijuana from Rudy Guede, and that's how they know each other. So, like, establishing that you're this pot-smoking person in the house and it's only you was a crucial part of this, slanderous,
right, especially
absurd
when
theory.
I was never the one procuring the marijuana in our household.
Yeah, nor were you the prime pothead of the house. Yeah. Follow up to that. There's also Meredith's British friends who weren't exactly your friends, but who were acquaintances that you were friendly with, who also didn't have kind things to say about you to the police, and I think on trial as well as witnesses. Have any of them ever reached out to you? Any further thoughts about that?
Nope. We'll see. We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, if they reached out tomorrow wanting to talk, would you talk? Yeah.
Open invitation, ladies. We all got to grow up. Next question.
Okay. This also comes from Twitter. What thing did you discover, learn, or develop or like in prison that you still do daily-ish? I'm hoping you have a silly answer to that question, because someone else asked a similar question that's a little more philosophical, which is, what's a Stoic principle that you use in your daily life and how? And I think that might also tie into what did you learn in prison, but I'm hoping you have both a serious and a frivolous answer here.
I mean, I kinda. So I don't know if you all know of the amazing qualities of the bidet, but in prison in Italy, you live and die by the bidet. It is, so for those who do not know what a bidet is, and also you might not know because here in the US, we have like bidets are just so uncommon, and typically the bidet feature is now just a feature of a toilet, like a Japanese style toilet. So the idea is water sprays you and you get clean that way as opposed to using toilet paper. However, in Italy, bidets are a whole separate thing, like a whole separate contraption next to your toilet that you sit down on after just whenever you want to cleanse yourself that way. And I didn't like get into the habit of using that until I was in prison. And in particular, because it became the thing that, like, it wasn't just for cleansing yourself down there. It was for on a hot day. Is it so hot and your like room is baking you? You put your feet in the bidet and put cold water on them. You wash your intimate underwear in there. Like it's a very, very useful piece of furniture that I now like feel weird in the US when there's just like this lack of bidets. And since, being forced to renovate one of our bathrooms because of a water leak, we installed at least a toilet with a bidet feature, and I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. I highly recommend the bidet. It's just so much more.
We're not savages in this household.
This is hygienic AF.
Yeah.
It is. You can't go back. You can't go back.
I know. Dead trees? You're going to wipe your butt with dead trees?
That's clean gross. The way. Yeah. No, it's just. So, bidets.
Who would have thought? Italians, just more hygienic. Yeah. Well, what about a serious answer? Is there a Stoic principle that you use in your daily life? Or Stoic technique?
Yeah, I think that something that is really helpful for me on a day-to-day basis is when I have, like, when the momentum of my day gets interrupted by something that I was not expecting, that really just interrupts what I'm attempting to accomplish during the day. I remember what it felt like to be trapped in a prison cell and be like, okay, I can't leave this door. I can't open this door. So what do I, like, here's the situation. Just make the most of this situation and do it and get on the other side of it. And then you can, like, in our brains, we have this idea that our days are going to be a certain way, and we have a plan. And when that plan gets interrupted, we end up getting like really angry and frustrated. And I think the thing that I have found to be very helpful is when I just remind myself, like, oh, that idea that I had in my brain of what my day was going to be like, that never actually existed. What actually exists is this thing that's happening right now. And to give a concrete example of that, it actually happened the other day where we're busily trying to get the kids out of the house because we're going to take them to the zoo, or, well, not the zoo, but it's something called the Northwest Trek, which is more of like this wide open area where animals that are natural to the Pacific Northwest are like available for viewing if you're lucky, kind of thing. But it's like a fun park to bring kids. And so Chris and I were going to bring the kids there on the last day of summer, and before Eureka started preschool again. And as I'm like hustling to get the kids and all the kids crap out of the house, I leave the door slightly ajar, and one of our cats, Mr. Fats, gets out. It is not safe for Mr. Fats to be out of the house when we're not there. There are coyotes, there are eagles, and he is a scrumptious little cat muffin. So we have to get him back into the house. And it just so happens to be one of those times where he will not respond to anything, not my calls, not my shaking of the treat jar. He is locked down wherever he is, and I don't know where that is. And so Chris and I spend the next 45 minutes tracking down Mr. Fats. And it was incredibly frustrating because we missed our ferry. We got late we finally eventually got to the place, but we were there late and we didn't get to spend as much time there as we wanted to. However, in the midst of all of that, like searching for Mr. Fats, there was an opportunity for me to just be really pissed off that my day had been interrupted and I would just get madder and madder and madder. Or I could just go, this is it. This is it. My dream of having been on a ferry already was just a dream. And what's really happening is this. So just do it. Just do it until it's done and then move on to the next thing. And that's a Stoic principle, I think, of accepting the world as it is and just committing yourself to the project of being an effective person here, as opposed to living this false reality in your head.
It almost reminds me a bit of negative visualization as well. When you said, you think back, okay, well, I'm trapped in this room. What can I do? Is a part of it also like, well, I'm not trapped in a fucking cell right now. I have the freedom to look for my cat.
That's a negative visualization. So yeah, that's something I often do too. Like, especially when I'm feeling frustrated with my husband or with my, I remind myself that there was a time in my life where I did not have the opportunity of having a husband. And so it's actually quite a blessing, even if sometimes it is an annoying blessing at times.
An annoying blessing. Can you crochet that
sure,
on a little pillow, maybe?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
For you, baby, anything.
We should make t-shirts that say that. Annoying blessing. Okay, moving on. This comes in from Matt. You mentioned that the job of the press is to sell the best story possible. I wonder what you think about how that relates to the legal system. For example, a prosecutor's job is also to sell the jury their interpretation of events, and the defense will attempt to slant things in their favor, so litigation isn't strictly factual, it's also salesmanship. I mean, I've heard you describe it before by saying that the courtroom is not a scientific laboratory where all this evidence is boiled down to truth beyond a reasonable doubt, but rather it's a battleground of storytelling. And I think, it's key to hone in on that storytelling aspect, because we think through stories. Like, stories are a big part of how we even process information. We retain information much better in narrative form than we do in lists. This is something that Yuval Harari talks about in his book Nexus. And it's why people are able to achieve incredible feats of memory when they put information into a story. If they're just trying to memorize a list of items, it's much more difficult, right? So our brains are hardwired
or
for
even
story,
just like,
and
not even story, even like
narrative.
wordplay. Like, if it don't fit, must acquit. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, rhyme.
Well,
like
rhyme.
it's like fucking.
Yeah.
It's fucking nursery rhymes is what it is, and it's just like, and it's just that's our brains. So
I mean, to devil's advocate you here for a second, like, what else are we supposed to do other than have, your best storyteller on one side countering by your best storyteller on the other side to try and balance the scales? You can't just, could you just tell people, stop telling stories, just present the facts?
I mean, there are people who argue stuff like that. Like, for instance, there are people who are doing studies on whether or not what kind of visual cues you use in a courtroom. Do you show pictures like crime scene footage in color or in black and white? And studies have shown that juries and judges are more lenient towards defendants if the footage that they are, like, the visual evidence that is presented to them is in black and white as opposed to color, because color, like the color of blood, say, activates us on this unconscious level, so that we are not merely adhering like the rule of law. Our emotions are being stirred up in the process of, judging an individual.
Yeah, I think the study showed that it was more likely to convict and to give a harsher sentence if the crime scene photographs are in color. I mean, that's a super interesting study, really clever design, right? Because it separates the sort of probative informational content of that photo from the emotive content. Do you think it's possible to do something like that with the other kinds of evidence, with witness testimony? I mean, you'd basically be saying a crying victim statement is emotional content that is going to sway people emotionally, but may not contribute facts.
Right. And
right?
I do think that, this is maybe a controversial opinion, but, and it's not like how a victim feels is not irrelevant, right? Like, if someone, like a good example of this is that break-in that we experienced, right? Where this person broke into our home in the middle of the night and you had to go and confront him. And I was upstairs trying to figure out, am I going to call the police or am I going to try to jump out of a second-story window with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old in my arms? I think that my personal stress as a result of this person breaking into the home, that is due to my own past history. Like, I have a particular trauma around home invasion. I have a particular trauma around calling the police as a result of a home invasion. So I experienced like extra layers of victimization on top of just the mere being in a house that is being invaded, that would be candy for a prosecutor in a victim statement, right? Like, he would look at the way that you have re-traumatized this person, and as a result of that, you should get the harshest sentence. But it's is my personal trauma relevant to the question at hand? Which is, is this person who broke into the home a threat to the still an ongoing threat to the people who are currently living in the home? And that's where it gets like sticky, is it's like, I don't think that victim statements are necessarily relevant when it comes to the application of the law, right? Like, I think, and I do think, well, and I do think that one of the issues is it highlights a failure of our justice system to actually support victims as much as it is focused on harming or like having there be negative consequences for offenders, right? Like, if the only thing that the justice system offers is either let this guy go or keep him locked up, and that's the only thing that prevents, like, that is the safety net between this person potentially breaking into our friend's home again, like, I'm incentivized to want to tell my like most deeply traumatic story in order to ensure that this person stays in prison, not because I think he deserves to be punished necessarily even more, but because that's the only way that I can protect my friends who and their house. Like, and that I think is a highlight of the failure of the justice system to not support victims, and instead to wield punishment.
Well, I think there's a fallacy there, right? It's that the system equates punishing the perpetrator with healing the victim, and that's just not the case. Like, if that were true, then it would make sense to say, well, let's figure out how exactly harmed you were, victim. And then we can use the depth and degree of harm you experienced as a proxy for how much we need to punish this guy, right? But if punishing the guy doesn't heal the victim, then the degree to which the victim is harmed should be irrelevant to how you're punishing him, unless your reason for punishing is vengeance, right? If you value vengeance, some people do. You and I don't. If you think it's a valid way to a valid input to our justice system, then yeah, the greater someone is harmed, the greater you harm them back. But if you don't believe in vengeance, then what you're doing with punishment is either rehabilitating, deterring, or keeping society safe by keeping that person from harming more people, right? And all of those things are irrelevant to how harmed this particular victim was. So, yeah. Man, our justice system
doesn't really fix the problem.
Yeah. No.
Next question.
It also just reminds me of how, okay. One of these days, we're going to fix the justice system on this Ask Amanda Anything, don't you think? Maybe it's the next one. Okay, last question here. This comes from Anonymous. Recently, I got a big promotion, and afterwards, some friends and family members I hadn't spoken to in a while popped into my inbox with some really passive-aggressive negative energy. I'm having a hard time dealing with it. I'm wondering how you deal with unexpected negative energy in your life.
Yeah, that sucks, dude. I totally understand that feeling. Actually, since the Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox has come out, I've also received some very weirdly out of the blue negative messages from either acquaintances or, just people peripherally in my life that were either overtly aggressive or very passive aggressive. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they happened right after the release of the show, right? And I do think like there's this J. Cole line that I think is really great, which is snakes in the grass let you know that you've arrived. Meaning that like if people start trying to take a bite out of you all of a sudden out of the blue, like that's a sign that you've achieved something. And actually, in a recent conversation with on Hard Knocks with Nicholas Christakis, he was even saying that like the sign of like true friendship is that people can be sad with you and happy with you. Like they're the kinds of people who you would feel safe to go with, both with bad news and with good news, knowing that they would be there to receive you and want the best for you in both circumstances, as opposed to feel like envy or yeah. So anyway, like that's something that I too struggle with, because in my life, I have received a lot of support in my time of need, but I don't feel like that means that people are entitled to be negative towards me when good things are happening to me in my life, you know? And so I've had like this really interesting realization now that like good things are happening to me, that some people who are there for me in my darkest days are not able to be there for me during my brightest days. And that's a weird thing, because you hear the idea of like fair weather friends, but you don't really hear of the idea of foul weather friends, like people who gravitate to you when you're in crisis. And it's just interesting. Like I wonder if some people have like savior complexes. I think maybe some people like want to be close to someone who's going through a crisis because it helps them feel less out of control in their own life by comparison. It's a distraction. So yeah, you might have some.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it, right? It's that something someone told me once about a friendship I had that collapsed, is that he said, well, maybe you're a shitty mirror. And what he meant was, maybe when this other person's around you, they're seeing parts of themselves that they don't like. And, you know, that's reflected back at them because they know how things went down. And what that means is that it's not about you, it's about them. And it, you know, whether or not they want to deal with those parts of themselves or not, like if they don't want to deal with them, being around you is a reminder of those things, right? So I think that's related to this idea that if you're in a really bad situation and someone is next to you, it's a reflection of what's going on in their life. And this is, I think, true of all of us to some degree, that we see ourselves in other people, right? Now, we can't help but reflect on, and it's just natural to compare, right? It's kind of a trap if you go down it too far, but we all do it. And we all measure ourselves up against everyone else. And this is partly why social media and the number of followers is like driving young girls crazy on Instagram and TikTok, you know? But I think, to get back to this person's question, what do you do about that? How do you deal with that negative energy? How do you not let that sour your day?
I mean, again, I think one of my biggest pieces of advice for everyone, everywhere, is to take everything less personally, and to recognize that if someone is sending you negative energy, that is a reflection of what they have inside of them and not you. Now, like, that isn't to say that, like, you know, and everyone has different ways of approaching different things. Like, when I'm feeling hurt by someone, my instinct is to put distance between me and them. It's not to like lash out or something. And like some people do lash out when they feel hurt. I don't think that that's a good way to communicate that you're hurt, but some people do that. And I think we're all guilty of that at some time. So that isn't to say that like if someone is sending you negative energy, it necessarily is solely in their imagination. They could be coming from a hurt place. But if it's like coming just like randomly, like or like coincidentally when something good is happening to you, like that to me is a reflection of like, oh, they have some internal stuff that they are projecting onto you, and that's not your problem. And so as much as you can, feel free to set a boundary and to put distance between yourself and that behavior. Like you don't have to, like, I think one of the things that we potentially do that is a mistake, and which is a mistake that I have made over and over again, is we feel like we have to engage with that negative energy. Like if someone sends us a negative energy, we need to like respond to it. And I think one of the best ways to diffuse negative energy is to ignore it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of that Buddhist principle of right speech, right? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And there's lots of responses that are true and necessary, but not kind. There's lots that are, I mean, kind is kind of the big one.
What the
I
kindness
think,
factor
right?
is
But like,
how you do it. So like if something is true, I think that whether or not you communicate something is the two pillars are, is it true and is it necessary, right? Like, so for you to communicate something to another person, you first of all need to ask yourself, is it true? And then you need to ask yourself, is it necessary? Like, does this person need to hear this from me? Is it necessary? Okay. If it passes those two pillars or those two gates, the final question is, how do you then communicate it? And the only way to communicate it that I think would be effective, not just ethical, but effective, is in a kind way. So how can you frame something like, you hurt me, in a way that can be kind and able to be heard by the other person? Because already what you want when you're communicating something to somebody is you want to be heard. And if you're communicating in an unkind way, you are setting yourself up to be not heard. And so if you feel like you have a true and necessary thing you want to communicate, above all, you want to be heard if you're going to go through the process of communicating. And the best way to be heard is to communicate kindly. So.
That's great. You should run a workshop.
I'm not perfect at this in my own life, but this is solid, hard-won advice.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for your questions. And if you want to reach out, you can submit more for the next Ask Amanda Anything episode through amandaknox.substack.com, also through Amanda's website, amandaknox.com. Or reach out on social media. Again, we will prioritize questions from subscribers. Any final words? One last reminder I will say is that a lot of what you're talking about with, right speech and these principles and like even the Stoic stuff, those are things that you and I really internalized from spending time on the Waking Up app and learning about Stoicism through the Waking Up app. There's a great track there, a great series of lectures called The Stoic Path by William Irvine that you and I both loved. Yeah.
But anyway, the point being that you should go to wakingup.com/Amanda Knox if you want to consider subscribing to Waking Up, which I always, always, always recommend. It is my number one app that I use for meditation, and it is an incredible, such an amazing resource. And if you subscribe through wakingup.com/Amanda Knox, it supports me and my work. So win-win.